This is Media Ethics Lecture 1, Part 2, a crash course in classical ethics and the relevance to today's issues. What we're going to be looking at is the whole concept of reoccurrence of ethical issues. Now, that's an important reason to study ethics. We want to avoid reinventing the wheel. For example, do we run a story that compromises someone's privacy but serves what we think is a greater good? Are we doing the right thing? Or is privacy an absolute, independent of whether we think that the ends justify the means? Now, those words I've been using, ends justifying the means, those are centuries-old issues. Do we say that the rightness of something is justified by the ends? Or do we argue that the right thing to do was always the right thing to do, regardless of what we imagine the outcome, the consequence, will be? This debate is called consequentialism versus non-consequentialism, and here's how it works. To define the term consequentialism, consequentialism is a philosophical term, meaning that it is the end result that matters. If the end is good, who cares what the motives were, what the reasoning was? The ethical decision, consequentialists argue, is the one that produces the greatest good for the greatest number. Now, non-consequentialism, as you might expect from the name, non-consequentialism, non-consequentialists feel that the consequences are not the important criterion. It is the motives that are the main issue. If something is right, they argue, it is always right. If it is wrong, it is always wrong. And you can't tinker with that by trying to invent a presumed consequence. Act, they argue, as though what you do would become a universal law. Now, there's a middle ground called the golden mean. Mean in this case means middle or average. It means the middle path between two extremes. The most famous proponent, you probably heard of him, is Aristotle. Aristotle advocated using practical reasoning to find the midpoint between, as he put it, excess and deficiency. Now, there are other names and theories. You'll see these in the readings. The Potter box, the veil of ignorance. They're important. The Potter box deals with things such as obligations. The veil of ignorance is about the idea of trying to lift preconceived notions. But in the end, I think it's fair to say that much of ethics is a continuum of consequentialism versus non-consequentialism, with the golden mean in the middle. And in future lectures, we'll use this structure to analyze these dilemmas. One other point, ethics is not always a convenient matter of right or wrong. In other words, it's not obvious. Sometimes we're looking for the higher right, the situation that produces a little bit better of an ethical outcome. Now, for example, we are at a news organization. We have a story we think is really good, but running it may put us out of business. We may get sued out of business. So which is the higher right? Is it telling the story that we think is important, even though we're taking a risky stand, and risking being sued out of existence? But if we do that, how can we serve the public? Now, that's something we're going to look at, a dilemma that we're going to examine in an upcoming film. The topic of our next lecture deals with some of the things that we've mentioned already. We're going to look at one of those perplexing higher right problems. Specifically, we'll look at the tricky intersection of the fact that journalism is a business as well as a craft. There's going to be a consequential versus non-consequential question coming up. We have a source giving us information that's pretty good, leading to a pretty good story. But he's an unsophisticated person, and he may be leading himself to ruin. Do the ends, in this case, justify the means? Secondly, what is the higher right or the higher good? Is it telling an important story that we think may help many people, maybe thousands, maybe millions? Or is it keeping our news organization in business? And as you'll see from the film, it could very well come to that.